All right, you absolute legends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Mark Ferguson, for those that don't know me, and today the long-awaited video about my Chinese custom titanium frame. And I'm going to show you guys where you can get it from, some tips and tricks on how to get it, and where you can save some money. Now let's first go through where I got mine from. So it's a company called Waltley Titanium. I've had friends that have got frames from Waltley before and they have had excellent results. And so, as I said, it gave me the confidence to go ahead and do it myself. Waltley Titanium's been around for a long time. If you go on the internet and you Google them, you'll find forums. There are people that have had experience with Waltley in the past, and for the most part you won't find many bad reviews. In fact, I didn't find any. So I also got the wheels, the carbon fiber wheels from China. And again, likewise, the wheels are absolutely outstanding quality wheels. They are 38mm uni-gloss finish carbon fiber wheels. They've got DT Swiss 350 hubs on them. And they're as good as any wheel that I've ever used or seen. So even though they don't have the brand name and the brand that you like and trust, they are as good and feel as good as, and I've done about 500 Ks on them. So I haven't done thousands of kilometers, but I've certainly done enough kilometers to go, you know what? This feels good. So look, you guys may be wondering why I've gone titanium over carbon, because I've always had carbon fiber bikes in the vlogs, and so now all of a sudden I've got a titanium bike. So when I did the Indy Pack in 2017 and I had all the bags and everything loaded on the bike, and plus me on the bike, it was very wobbly. The bike was sort of it was unstable, and it just didn't feel, for the whole ride I was like, man, is this bike going to snap? So definitely a titanium bike is probably better suited to that sort of thing. I know, look, it doesn't really matter what you do these adventure rides on. You can do them on carbon fiber bikes, but I think titanium bikes just handle the load a little bit better. A couple of days before I got sick, actually, I loaded the bike up with all the bags and sort of filled everything up and had all the bags, saddle bag and everything, just to test out what it was like. And I took it for a ride around the block a couple of times, and this frame just handled it. It really didn't even feel like the bags were on there. So even when I got out of the saddle and I sort of kicked a little bit, it didn't wobble or it didn't feel as though it was unstable. So it seems to me that titanium frames are definitely better suited to that sort of setup. And that is exactly what I intend on doing on this bike. All right, so let's get into pricing, which I know is what you guys really want to know. The actual titanium frame, so the frame alone, and keeping in mind it's a disc brake frame. It's got all the mounts on for the disc brakes and so on. $780 US. And so, to me, that is a pretty amazing price, because you would pay significantly more, as I said to you earlier, if you were to go locally. Obviously, before you go to Waltley, you're going to need to know a few things. So in my case, I've got a SRAM Force ETEP AXS group set on it, which is a mouthful, but it's a fully wireless group set. So when Waltley came back to me and said, do you need internal cable routing? It's not really relevant in my situation, but you're going to need to know whether you're going to put Di2 or cable and all these bits and pieces on the frame before you send off for it. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get your measurements. You're going to have to get a bike fit or have some sort of measurements on paper that you can send through to Waltley. The alternative to that, and what I did in the end, was I went to a bike frame that I love and I've had a great history with. That was the Canyon Air Road. I love that geometry and I love that bike. And so I basically went online, took all the measurements for the bike that fitted me, and I sent it through to Waltley and I said, look, can you make a bike based on this frame? And that's essentially what they did. Obviously, you're going to need to know things like, do you want a BSA bottom bracket? Do you want threaded? Do you want internal cable routing? And so I would advise having a good idea of exactly what you want and really sort of knowing what you want before you go to Waltley. And what you're going to use the bike for. Are you going to use it for crit races? Are you going to use it for a combination of crit races and adventure riding? So, have an understanding of what you want, and you can pretty much get anything. You can get mountain bikes or CX bikes or whatever. So one thing I will say is the boys at Port Melbourne Cycles, when they put the bike together and they put all the group set and everything on it, they did find one minor problem which was easily fixed. I've got some footage of that. Let's go across and see what they can explain it better than what I can. So let's go to that footage now. The frame itself and the welds are absolutely fantastic, but there was one problem with the rear disc mounts.
So it just needed facing up. The tool, the frame wasn't faced great from the factory, so it needed the top of the mount here. Needed cut in flush, so it's flat.
Okay.
Just needed like a couple of mil taking off so we could get the caliper nice and central.
Yeah.
So that's why it was rubbing, but now it's lovely.
So the caliper was out of whack, so it wasn't straight up and down, it was slightly off centre. And so poor Zor, standing over here around the corner here, so he's the owner of Port Melbourne Cycles, but he went and got, a facing tool?
They got a facing tool.
So he got a facing tool?
Which we needed it anyway.
Yeah, so they wanted one anyway, but a facing tool basically flattens off these mounts. For carbon fibre bikes, it's much easier to do, but for titanium bikes, it's very difficult to do. So, Zor spent how many hours?
Few.
What do you think of Daddy's bike? Pretty sick, hey? Do you love it? Yeah, you want to touch the lens, don't you? Let's go. So yeah, that was really the only issue with the frame was the facing on that rear disc mount. Other than that, it was pretty perfect. So this is quite common apparently. It's quite common for even top tier factories when they send out their very well known brands in the carbon fibre bike disc brake world. And so quite often, there's a lot of mechanics that have to face those mounts down. So once you send the specs off to Waltley, they will take about 6 to 8 weeks to get you back some pictures, and they sent me some photos of the frame in the factory. So that was pretty cool. I actually got to see it before they sent it. And then I paid about $90 for shipping to Australia. Didn't really have any problems with customs at all because it stays under that. In Australia, I think it has to stay under $1,000 to not incur any extra stamp duty and stuff. So I didn't have any problems there with customs, and it came through pretty much, very well packaged and in one piece. So, I was really happy with the result. Now, it is a bit of a contentious issue buying these Chinarellos and buying these cheap frames from China. I will argue that probably 95% of bikes that are on the market, most of your bikes are Chinese-made bikes. Even the big brands, Giants, Specialized, they all go to China to get their frames. And so the contentious issue is really around the lower tier factories that don't have the QA and don't have the safety standards, producing products that could potentially snap while you're out riding, for example, forks breaking and things like that, people crashing. So there is some moral issues around that. I caught up with Rob Gelatis from Factor Bikes here in Melbourne. He's the CEO of Factor Bikes. He lives in Taiwan. And he was here in Melbourne 2 weeks ago. We had a chat about this exact subject, and here's what he had to say.
I think one of the most damaging things to the bicycle industry over the past 10 years has actually been what I call the open model. And the open model is factories that don't have enough business working direct to brands. So they've opened a mold based off of usually a design that they kind of copied from another brand, and then they offer it for sale to anyone who wants to come put their decals on it. However, those factories are all second and third tier factories. They don't have the same level of quality control and testing as does a first tier factory. a first-tier factory is somebody who's working for a Cervelo, a Trek, a Giant, a Cannondale. And then you have the second-tier factory, somebody who's working for, you know, a DeRosa, a Pinarello, someone like that. And then you have this next tier of factories, and there's hundreds of them. And maybe it's, you know, they're producing, you know, 100, 200, 300 frames a month. But, you know, people can go there, can buy 5 frames, put a name on it, come home, have a bike company. And it's been very damaging because those are the frames that we see broken more often than not. Those are the frames we see that are the counterfeit frames more often than not. And then it gives the material a bad image when they start breaking. It gives people concern.
So look, we all have different opinions. There are people that are going to agree with this and people that are going to disagree with it. It's entirely up to you. I'm just giving you the information and giving you my personal experience, and you guys can go ahead and make your decision from there. For a manufacturer who are building them locally, it's quite expensive for that bike builder to build that product, and therefore that cost is going to be passed on to the end user. So it's likely that you're going to be paying, you know, many thousands of dollars, up around $5,000-$6,000 for a custom titanium frame from a local reputable bike builder. Probably less, probably, you know, even cheaper in some cases, but for the most part you're going to be handing over a pretty penny. And for someone like me, who's got a young family now, we've dropped from 2 wages. Hannah's now a stay-at-home mum. We're on a single wage. We really have to start thinking about our pennies, and so this was a good option for me. And really, to be honest with you as well, I wanted to go through the process of doing this, obviously with Cycling Maven as a bit of a legacy thing. I wanted to experience what it was like to buy a frame from China and build it up. And I've had friends that have done it and they've had excellent results. So it sort of gave me the confidence to go ahead and do it. All up, I'd say I am really happy with this bike. It's probably one of the best bikes I've ever ridden. I absolutely love it. It is probably the SRAM Force ETAP AXS has something to do with that, because it's such a beautiful, smooth change. And I'll do a full review on that group set coming up in another video. But for now, I would say, you know, this bike's a 9 out of 10, and I would highly recommend Whatley. But don't limit yourself to Whatley. Do some research, check it out, and the same goes with Fast Sports. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it, and I'll see you in the next video, you absolute legends.
Are they low fat?
There's a couple of vegetarians. Leash is a veggie, so